Your soulmate left you a secret love letter. Read it before tomorrow. My beloved child, stop for a moment and listen carefully, because the message you are about to hear is not meant to feel ordinary. Somewhere in the quiet space between yesterday and tomorrow, a secret has been waiting for you, and the strange part is that the person connected to it has already put their feelings into words. They did not say everything out loud. They could not. Instead, they left behind something private, something they believed you might discover when the time was right, a love letter. Don't skip, because the most important part of this message is not what the letter says at first glance, but what is hidden behind the words. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you, and the final revelation may completely change the way you understand their silence. Imagine someone sitting alone, holding a pen, staring at a blank page for several minutes because they do not know how to explain what has been happening inside their heart. They write one sentence, stop, cross it out, try again, and finally realize that no sentence is strong enough. They remember your face, your voice, the moments when you were together, and even the moments when distance seemed to separate you. Then they begin writing again. This is where the secret love letter begins. It is not simply a collection of romantic words. It carries hesitation, regret, hope, and one confession they have been protecting for longer than you realize. They wanted to tell you that their silence was never proof that they stopped caring. In fact, their silence may have been caused by how deeply they cared. There are people who speak when they are certain, and there are people who become quiet when their emotions become too powerful to control. Your soulmate belongs to the second kind. They have been carrying a conversation with you in their mind even when you were not there. They imagined what they would say if you suddenly appeared in front of them. They imagined your reaction. They wondered whether you would believe them. And eventually, instead of waiting for the perfect moment, they chose the one thing they could control, their words on paper. But there is something else you need to understand before we go deeper. This letter was not written because they suddenly remembered you. You were already somewhere in their thoughts. Something recently brought those feelings back to the surface, something small perhaps, but emotionally powerful enough to make them realize that they could no longer pretend everything was fine without you. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because the final part of this letter contains the one sentence they were most afraid you would ever read. There is a reason the first line of the letter was never sent immediately. Your soulmate looked at it again and again, wondering whether they should actually let you see it. The opening words were simple, but behind them was an emotion that had been hidden for far too long. They wanted to begin with an apology, but they did not want the entire letter to sound like regret. They wanted to say, "I am sorry," yet they also wanted you to know that they were not sorry for caring about you. They were sorry for the moments when fear made them act differently from what their heart was saying. Think about that for a moment. Sometimes a person does not walk away because they have found someone better. Sometimes they create distance because being close forces them to confront feelings they do not know how to handle. Your soulmate may have spent more time fighting their own thoughts than fighting you. Every time they tried to convince themselves that they had moved forward, something reminded them of you. A song. A familiar place. A particular time of day. A phrase someone accidentally said. A memory appearing without warning. And suddenly, the distance they had created did not feel like freedom anymore. It felt like an unfinished sentence. That is why the letter exists. They needed somewhere to place everything they could not say directly. The next part of the letter reveals that they have been wondering whether you still think about them. They never had the courage to ask. They feared the answer. They feared that you might say no. They feared that you might have moved on emotionally, even if your life continued in a different direction. But there was another fear even stronger than that one, the fear that you might still care and they might have waited too long. This is where the emotional weight of the letter becomes impossible to ignore. They write about the times they almost contacted you and then stopped. They remember opening a message, typing several words, deleting them, typing again, and finally putting the phone away. They tell you that those moments were not meaningless. Every unsent message represented something they were struggling to admit. And then comes a sentence that changes the entire tone of the letter. If you are reading this, then maybe the time has finally come for me to stop hiding what I really feel. Don't skip, because that sentence is only the doorway. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, and the deeper you enter this letter, the clearer it becomes that their silence was never as simple as it appeared. Tonight, I want you to imagine the next page turning slowly, because this is where your soulmate reveals something they have never been comfortable admitting. They tell you that they tried to replace the feeling they had for you with distractions. They filled their schedule. They talked to people. They focused on other responsibilities. They told themselves that time would make everything easier. But time did something unexpected. Instead of erasing the emotional connection, it showed them which memories were temporary and which ones remained. They discovered that some people pass through your life and leave memories behind, while others become part of the way you understand yourself. They are beginning to realize that you belong to the second category. That realization frightened them. It made them question decisions they had made before. It made them revisit conversations they once dismissed. They started thinking about the exact moment when everything between you began to change. They wondered what would have happened if they had been more honest. What if they had listened instead of assuming? What if they had expressed their feelings instead of protecting their pride? What if they had told you what was truly happening inside them? The letter becomes almost like a confession at this point. They admit that there were moments when they wanted you to chase them, even though they knew that was unfair. They wanted reassurance without having to ask for it. They wanted to know that you cared without exposing themselves first. And now they understand that love cannot survive forever on unspoken expectations. They write that one of their biggest regrets is making you question your own importance. They never wanted you to believe that you were forgettable. They never wanted you to feel as though you were easy to replace. If anything, the opposite was true. Your presence affected them more deeply than they ever admitted. Then they write something that feels almost impossible to ignore. I thought leaving would make me miss you less. But it only taught me how much space you occupied in my heart. That sentence is not the end. It is the beginning of the most surprising confession in the entire letter. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because soon you will discover why this letter was connected to tomorrow. The fourth page contains a date, and this is where everything suddenly becomes more mysterious. Your soulmate has been thinking about a particular moment that is approaching, a moment they believe could finally give them an opportunity to change the direction of this story. They do not know exactly how you will respond, which is why they wrote the letter before making any move. They wanted their truth to exist somewhere outside their fear. They wanted you to know what they felt even if their courage disappeared at the last second. The letter says that tomorrow represents more than another day on the calendar. It represents a deadline they created for themselves, not because the universe demanded it, but because they finally became tired of postponing the truth. They have been telling themselves, later. Later I will speak. Later I will explain. Later I will tell them how I feel. Later I will make things right. But later kept becoming another day, another week, another month. Eventually they realized that waiting for the perfect moment was becoming an excuse to remain silent. So they chose tomorrow. And there is something incredibly emotional about that decision. They are not promising perfection. They are not claiming they suddenly understand everything. They are simply admitting that they no longer want fear to make every decision for them. The letter reveals that they want one honest opportunity to speak without pretending to be unaffected. They want to tell you what they should have told you much earlier. They want you to know that the connection mattered to them, even during the periods when they acted as if it did not. And then comes a line that makes the letter feel almost like a final invitation. If tomorrow gives me one chance, I will finally tell you the truth. What truth? That is the question. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because the next part of the letter finally explains what they have been afraid to confess. Is perhaps the most vulnerable sentence they have written. I never stopped choosing you in my heart, even when my actions made it look like I had. Read that again in your mind, because it explains why their behavior may have seemed so confusing. Their heart and their actions were moving in opposite directions. They wanted closeness, but they created distance. They wanted communication, but they stayed silent. They wanted reassurance, but they acted independent. They wanted to know whether you still cared, but they were afraid to ask. The letter admits that this contradiction was exhausting. They began realizing that pretending not to care was actually costing them more than admitting that they did. They also admit something unexpected. They sometimes wondered whether you were secretly waiting for them too. They imagined you reading a message from them. They imagined the conversation that might follow. They imagined hearing your voice again and finally saying the things they had rehearsed privately. But then they would remember the possibility of rejection, and their courage would disappear. This is why the letter is so important. It allows them to say everything without seeing your reaction immediately. They can be honest on paper in a way they struggle to be face to face. Then they reach the part that may surprise you most. They describe a moment when they realized they were still emotionally connected to you. It was not some dramatic event. It was something ordinary. They were doing something completely unrelated, and suddenly one thought about you appeared so strongly that everything else became quiet for a moment. That was when they understood that the feeling had not disappeared. They had simply buried it beneath everyday life. They write, "I can keep pretending, but I cannot keep pretending to myself." That is the turning point. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because the next words reveal what they secretly hope you will do after reading their letter. Now the letter changes from confession to invitation. Your soulmate asks you not to judge the person they were during the difficult moments. They are not asking you to forget everything that happened. They are asking you to understand that they have been learning from it. They admit that some mistakes came from insecurity, some from pride, and some from simply not knowing how to communicate what they felt. They know that an apology cannot automatically erase the past. They know that trust is rebuilt through consistency, not dramatic promises. That is why the next part of their message is surprisingly calm. They say they do not want to overwhelm you with promises. They want to offer honesty instead. They want to start with a conversation. One real conversation where neither person has to pretend. They want to ask you what you felt. They want to hear what hurt you. They want to know what you needed but never received. And most importantly, they want to tell you what they needed but were too afraid to ask for. This is where the emotional connection becomes deeper than romance. It becomes recognition. Two people realizing that they may have misunderstood each other while both were secretly hoping to be understood. The letter says, "I don't need you to answer everything immediately. I only need you to know that I am finally ready to be honest." That line is powerful because it removes pressure. It is not demanding an immediate decision. It is asking for a chance to tell the truth. Then your soulmate writes about the possibility of seeing you again. They imagine what it would feel like to sit across from you and have no secrets left between you. They imagine the silence before the first words. They imagine the nervousness. They imagine the moment when both of you realize that despite everything that happened, the connection still feels familiar. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because there is one final confession hidden near the end of this letter, and it explains why they could not simply walk away. The 7th page is different from everything before it. There are fewer words, almost as if your soulmate became emotional while writing. They pause before admitting something they have never wanted to say out loud. They were afraid that they were not enough for you. They worried that one day you would meet someone who could give you everything they struggled to give. They feared being compared. They feared disappointing you. And rather than admitting those fears, they sometimes acted as though they did not care. The letter explains that distance was easier than vulnerability. If they stayed distant, they could protect themselves from the possibility of hearing that they were not wanted. But protection came with a price. Every day they remained silent became another day in which you might believe their feelings were gone. They now understand that hiding fear can create the very outcome you are afraid of. They write that they wish they had trusted the connection more. They wish they had trusted you enough to tell you when they were uncertain instead of pretending to have all the answers. Then comes a confession that changes the emotional meaning of the entire letter. The truth is, I was never afraid of loving you. I was afraid of how much your absence would matter if I lost you. Suddenly, all the previous pages make sense. The hesitation. The silence. The unsent messages. The distance. The memories. The repeated attempts to move forward. It was never simply about forgetting. It was about protecting a heart that already knew how important you had become. And now they have reached the point where protection no longer feels better than honesty. They would rather risk being vulnerable than spend another year wondering what might have happened if they had spoken. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because the next page contains the sentence they wrote after putting the pen down, picking it up again, and finally deciding they could not leave it unsaid. The 8th page begins with 3 words that may stop you emotionally. I still remember. Then they describe details they never told you they noticed. They remember the way you reacted to certain situations. They remember little expressions, small habits, moments when you thought nobody was paying attention. They remember conversations you probably considered ordinary. They remember the moments when you encouraged them without realizing how much those words mattered. They remember the times you were there when they needed someone, even if neither of you called it anything important at the time. And this is what makes the letter powerful. The memories they mention are not the dramatic ones. They are the tiny ones. The ones that prove they were paying attention. They tell you that sometimes a person becomes unforgettable not because of one extraordinary moment, but because of hundreds of small moments that quietly become part of your emotional world. They write that they still remember something you said that gave them courage during a difficult period. They remember a look that made them feel understood. They remember a conversation that ended too quickly. They remember the last time they saw you and how many things they wanted to say but kept inside. Then they write, "If I could return to that moment, would not waste a second pretending you meant less to me than you did." That sentence carries the weight of regret, but it also carries hope. Because the letter is not being written to live in the past. It is being written to change what happens next. Your soulmate wants to create a new memory instead of endlessly replaying an old one. They want tomorrow to become the day when the unfinished sentence finally receives its ending. But there is still one secret they have not revealed. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. Because the final page is where they finally say what their heart has been trying to say all along. The 9th page is almost completely blank at first. Then, near the bottom, there is a sentence written carefully, as if every word had to survive the fear of being rejected. Your soulmate writes, "If you ever wondered whether you mattered to me, I hope this letter answers you." Then they continue. They say you mattered during the moments they smiled because of you. You mattered during the moments they were frustrated with themselves. You mattered when they tried to move forward. You mattered when they told themselves to stop looking back. You mattered when something reminded them of you unexpectedly. And you mattered even when they were too proud to admit it. They say they cannot change every decision they made. But they can change what they choose from this point forward. Then comes the part they have been building toward since the first page. They admit that the letter was never really about saying goodbye. It was about creating one final opportunity for honesty. They wanted you to know that their feelings were real before they made their next move. They wanted you to understand that tomorrow is not a threat or a countdown. It is simply the moment they have chosen to stop hiding. Then they write something that may feel almost impossible to believe. "I don't want another version of our story. I want to see what happens when we both stop being afraid." Those words transform the entire letter. This is no longer simply a confession from someone looking backward. It is a message from someone who wants to know whether a new chapter is possible. And now, there is only one page remaining. The page they almost tore out because the final words felt too vulnerable. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because the final message is the reason this secret love letter needed to reach you before tomorrow.